The shrill alarm cut through the silence like a blade. 5 o'clock a.m., too early, too sudden. My phone vibrated on the nightstand, buzzing relentlessly, but I didn't move right away. I didn't panic. I just laid there, staring up at the dark wooden beams above me. The faintest hint of dawn creeping through the window. Buzz, another notification. Slowly, I reached over and grabbed my phone, my fingers brushing the cool glass. Mrs. Harland, it was Mike, my new security guard. His voice was shaky. I'm sorry to wake you, but your daughter-in-law. She's here. She's got a moving truck with her and 3 guys. She says she owns the house now. I felt the words settle in my chest, heavy and cold. I didn't say anything for a moment, just listened to the static crackling through the phone. My tea sat untouched on the bedside table, the cup still cold since I'd put it down at midnight. Let her in, I said, my voice steady, calm, but... She's got papers, ma'am, Mike stammered. She's waving them around, saying you don't live here anymore. Should I call the cops? No, I replied, cutting him off. Let her in, just make sure she signs the visitor log. Full name, time of arrival, reason for the visit. There was a beat of silence on the other end. Are you sure? I'm sure, I said, ending the call and setting the phone down. Outside, I could hear the low hum of a truck engine coming up the driveway, the gravel crunching under tires. Doors slammed, voices floated up to my window. I didn't rush. I wasn't nervous. Melissa. I got out of bed, slipped on my robe, and tied it tightly around my waist. Calm, collected. I'd been waiting for this. For weeks now. I wasn't about to let her think she could push me out. Let me pause here for a second. I know you're listening, maybe while you're driving, maybe even while you're sorting laundry. Wherever you are, I'd love to know. Drop a comment and tell me where you're tuning in from, and what time it is. And if this story's got your attention, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. You won't want to miss what happens next. Alright, back to my cabin. I walked over to the window, pulled back the curtain just enough to see the driveway below. The moving truck was parked crooked, blocking the path to my garden shed. 3 men were unloading boxes, clearly uncomfortable in their bulky jackets. And there she was, Melissa. Wrapped in a long wool coat, her hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, her phone screen lighting up her face as she tapped at it frantically. She looked victorious, radiant even, like she'd already won. I let the curtain drop back into place and turned to look at my reflection in the mirror. Gray hair, neat and tucked behind my ears, eyes clear. No panic, no fear. Just patience. I picked up my tablet from the desk and unlocked it. The security camera feed lit up, showing 6 different angles of the property: the living room, the kitchen, the porch, the driveway. Every corner of this place was covered, time-stamped, and saved. And she had no clue. I watched her march up the porch steps, heels clicking against the wood. She knocked twice, hard, demanding. Open up, she called through the door. This is my property now, I smiled faintly and set the tablet down. My tea sat there, forgotten and cold, but I took a slow sip. Bitter, like the quiet power I felt in that moment. Melissa had no idea what I'd done yesterday. But she would soon. I need to take you back. Back to a time when mornings were simpler. When the only sound waking me up was bird song instead of alarm bells. Let's rewind the clock a little to 4 months before that knock at my door. For months earlier, life had been simpler. My mornings began with the soft rustling of leaves outside my cabin, the kind of quiet I had worked my entire life to achieve. No alarms, no chaos, just the peaceful rhythm of nature. I had just retired from teaching biology at a high school in Denver after 30 years. 30 years of watching teenagers wrestle with complex concepts like cellular respiration and photosynthesis. 30 years of shaping young minds, helping them grow, stumble, and eventually find their way in the world. When I packed up my classroom and handed in my keys, I didn't feel lost. I felt free. The cabin, tucked away in the Colorado mountains, had been a refuge for over a decade. It wasn't large, just 2 cozy bedrooms, a kitchen where I grew herbs on the sill, and a living room with a stone fireplace I'd learned to tend myself. It sat surrounded by towering pines and wildflowers, a place where you could hear the wood creak when the temperature dropped and smell rain coming hours before it arrived. I didn't need much. My days were filled with simple routines. I'd sit on the back porch in the mornings with a cup of tea, watching the mist rise off the trees. In the afternoons, I'd spend time in the garden, coaxing tomatoes and basil to grow in the high-altitude soil. The evenings were for books, or working on quilts I donated to a shelter in town. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. Solitude had become a gift. It gave me room to think, to move through my home without anyone else's agenda, to make decisions on my own terms. But I'd be lying if I said there weren't moments when the silence pressed a little too close. Nights when I wished I could share a meal with someone, hear laughter that wasn't my own echoing off the walls. So I'd call Daniel. My only son. Daniel, the man who had once spent his summers building tree houses and rescuing injured birds, who now worked in tech consulting and called me every Sunday without fail. We weren't the kind of family that smothered each other, but we respected each other deeply. He'd drive up to the cabin once a month, help fix whatever had broken, and we'd sit by the fire talking about everything and nothing. He was proud of the life he'd built, proud of his independence. And I was proud of him. But Daniel had one flaw I'd noticed since he was a kid. He trusted too easily. He saw the good in people, even when the signs were there that maybe, just maybe, that trust wasn't deserved. As his mother, I worried someone would take advantage of that. I just never expected it would be the woman he'd fallen in love with. The phone rang one late April afternoon. The snow had melted from the ground, and the sun had started to warm the cabin. I wiped my hands on my gardening gloves before answering. Mom, Daniel's voice was upbeat, excited. I've got something to tell you, I smiled, standing up and brushing dirt off my knees. Oh yeah. What's going on? Well, I met someone. Her name's Melissa. I froze for a second. I hadn't been expecting this. I wasn't sure why, but I wasn't prepared to hear about anyone new. Melissa? Tell me more. She's amazing, Mom. Really? We've been seeing each other for a few months now. I wanted to wait until I was sure, but I'm sure. She's the one. I leaned back against the counter trying to keep the surprise out of my voice. That's great, honey. What's she like? He went on to tell me all about her. Smart, driven, ambitious. She worked in finance, managing portfolios for private clients. She'd moved to Denver from the East Coast and loved hiking as much as he did. They'd met at a networking event, and the chemistry had been immediate. They'd started talking about trail recommendations, and things just clicked. She wants to meet you, Daniel said. She's really excited about it. I felt my chest tighten slightly, but I pushed the feeling away. Of course. Bring her up whenever you're ready. I'll cook dinner. He sounded relieved. Thanks, Mom. You won't regret it. I know you'll love her. The following Saturday arrived, and I spent the morning preparing. Not out of nerves, but out of respect for the occasion. Daniel's first serious girlfriend deserved my full attention. I made roast rosemary chicken, the dish Daniel had always loved, and set the table with linen napkins I'd ironed that morning. The cabin smelled of fresh bread and wood smoke, welcoming, warm. When their car finally pulled up, I stepped onto the porch, wiping my hands on my apron. Daniel grinned and waved as he got out of the car, looking lighter than I'd seen him in months. And then I saw her. Melissa. Tall, elegant, with dark hair that cascaded in perfect waves over her shoulders. She wore a cream sweater and jeans that looked like they belonged in a fashion magazine. Her smile was wide, confident. She had the kind of charm that made you feel like she'd won you over before you'd even spoken. She extended her hand when she reached the porch, a firm, practiced grip. Mrs. Heron, she said, her voice warm. It's such an honor to finally meet you. Daniel talks about you all the time. I took her hand, my smile polite but reserved. Please call me Helen. It's lovely to meet you too. Daniel stood beside her, his arm around her waist. Isn't this place amazing, Mom? I was telling Melissa about the view from the back porch. It's stunning. Melissa smiled at him, but her eyes drifted past me, looking around the porch, as though she couldn't wait to get inside. She was already cataloging everything. That evening, dinner went off without a hitch. Melissa was polite, engaging, and charming. She complimented the meal, asked about my years of teaching, laughed at all the right moments, and touched Daniel's arm whenever he spoke. But something nagged at me. It was subtle at first, just the way her gaze lingered on the details too long to measured. Like she was taking mental notes, evaluating everything. So Helen, she asked, stirring her wine, do you ever think about moving closer to the city? It must be hard being up here alone, especially during the winter. I felt a flicker of discomfort. I managed just fine, I replied, keeping my tone even. I've always preferred solitude to crowds. Her expression shifted, just a touch. Of course, I just mean being up here alone, away from everything. Don't you worry about emergencies? I mean, at your age. These things happen at your age. It was subtle, but there it was again. Her calm concern laced with just a touch too much calculation. Daniel shifted beside her, his hand resting on her back. Mom's tougher than anyone I know, he said, trying to smooth over the moment. She doesn't need to worry about that stuff yet. Melissa gave a small, tight smile. Of course, I just think ahead, that's all. It's what I do for work, planning for the future, making sure people are protected. I noticed the way her fingers drummed on the edge of her wine glass. The way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. She wasn't worried about me. She was setting something up. As the evening wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, but I was trying to keep an open mind. Maybe I was just being paranoid, but the truth was, I couldn't ignore the subtle hints, the questions, the glances. The too perfect politeness. I was beginning to realize that I wasn't the only one with an agenda. 3 weeks after their visit, Daniel called to tell me the news. I could hear the excitement in his voice before he even said a word. Mom, she said. Yes, he blurted, his breath quick, like he couldn't wait to share the news. What do you mean? I asked, even though I knew exactly what he was talking about. The question was just a way to buy myself some time, a chance to brace myself. We're engaged. Melissa and I, she agreed. One proposed last night. It was at that restaurant we've been talking about, with the view of the city. I didn't respond right away. I was happy for him, of course, but it was hard to ignore the creeping feeling that had settled in my chest ever since I met Melissa. It wasn't about their love. It wasn't about him being happy. It was something else. That's great, Daniel, I said finally. I'm so happy for you both. I meant it mostly. The wedding plans came together quickly, too quickly if you asked me. But I kept my thoughts to myself. After all, it wasn't my place to decide how fast my son moved. They held the ceremony in Denver, small and intimate. Only close family and a handful of friends. Melissa wore a simple white dress, but there was a certain sleekness to it that made it look too polished, too perfect. Daniel looked at her with a kind of devotion that made my heart swell with both pride and worry. I raised my glass to their future, and though I danced with my son at the reception, something in me couldn't shake the feeling that I was watching a slow-motion train wreck. It wasn't their marriage I feared, it was the woman he'd chosen to marry. The weeks following the wedding felt off. At first, it was small things. Daniel's calls grew less frequent. We'd always spoken every Sunday without fail, but now it was every other week, then once a month. His messages were brief, almost robotic. Something wasn't right. But it wasn't just that. I began to notice changes in his tone when we spoke. There was a disconnect, a chill. The once warm, easygoing son I knew now spoke with hesitation, like his words were being edited before they reached me. One day, after a particularly short conversation, I sat down at my kitchen table, the phone still warm in my hand. I hadn't heard from him in 2 weeks. I'd tried to push it out of my mind, to tell myself I was overthinking things. But the nagging feeling wouldn't go away. That's when the first seed of doubt really took root. Melissa wasn't just changing my son. She was separating him from me. One night, Daniel called with a suggestion that made my blood run cold. Mom, Melissa and I were talking, he said, his voice careful, like he was walking on eggshells. She thinks it would be a good idea if you got a medical alert system, just in case something happens. My heart dropped. Medical alert system? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Daniel, I'm fine. I've been living up here for years without any issues. I'm in good health, I know, Mom, he said quickly, but it's just a precaution. You know, in case of a fall or you're getting older. It's not a bad idea. The words stung, even if he didn't mean them to. I'm 62, Daniel. I'm not 90, I know, he said, his voice faltering, but Melissa just. She's worried. And I don't want you to be alone and something happens and we can help you in time. I didn't know what to say. I could feel the edges of my patience wearing thin, but I swallowed my frustration. I'll think about it, I said, finally, ending the conversation with a forced cheerfulness. I didn't think about it. I knew what it really was, another way for her to control my life, to make me feel dependent. But the next week, he called again. "Mom," he said, "Melissa was wondering if you've thought about updating your will. She says it's really important to have everything in order, especially at your age." There it was again. At your age? Like I was somehow fragile, incapable of managing my own affairs. "My will is fine," I replied evenly. "I updated it 2 years ago with my lawyer." "Right," he said, but his voice didn't sound convinced. "Melissa just thinks it's good to have things reviewed regularly. She works with estates, you know. She said she can help. I don't need help with my will, Daniel." "But I appreciate the offer." There was a brief silence, and then, "Okay, Mom. Just let me know if you change your mind." I hung up the phone, but the damage was done. I could feel her influence creeping into every conversation, every decision he made. She was starting to rewrite the narrative of my life, and I was helpless to stop it. Then came the unannounced visits. They started with casual deliveries, groceries I hadn't ordered, pastries I didn't want. Every week, Melissa would show up at the cabin, always with some excuse. She'd just been in the area or thought I could use some help. But each time, she'd move through the house like she owned it, inspecting my space, my belongings, and touching things like she had every right to. The first time she came, she brought a box of croissants. I didn't ask for them, but when I opened the door, there she was. Standing with that smile of hers, that same practiced warmth. She handed me the box, and before I could say anything, she was already inside, checking the cupboards, asking questions about my health, my routines. "You know, Helen," she said, glancing around, "this place is lovely, but isn't it a lot of work to maintain on your own? I mean, you're not getting any younger, right?" The comment hit me like a slap in the face. But I kept my cool, keeping my voice calm as I answered. "I manage just fine. I know, but don't you worry about emergencies." She didn't pause, just kept going like this was all part of the plan. "I'm just thinking about you, Helen. You know, Daniel worries about you." That was the first time I felt it, the true weight of her manipulation. She wasn't here to help. She was here to take over. Slowly, steadily, methodically. And I was letting her. It wasn't until the following month that I realized just how far she was willing to go. The rumors started to slip into town. Margaret, my neighbor, was the first one to say something. I waved as she drove past my house one afternoon. She looked right at me, then immediately turned her gaze forward and kept driving. No smile, no wave. The next day, I went to the local store to pick up some things, but when I approached the counter, the cashier, Beth, barely acknowledged me. It wasn't like her. She usually asked how the garden was going or how I was holding up. But that day, she scanned my items in silence, avoiding eye contact. I tried to make small talk. "Everything okay, Beth?" She glanced at me quickly before looking away. "Yeah, just busy today," she muttered, her voice distracted. The whole interaction felt wrong, too cold, too rehearsed. And I began to piece it together. Melissa was talking to people, spreading stories, laying the groundwork for something bigger. That night, I sat down at the kitchen table, feeling the weight of it all, the lies, the manipulation, the slow erosion of everything I had built. I thought about Daniel, how he'd changed, how he wasn't the same anymore. But I had one thing she couldn't take from me, my mind, and I was going to fight back. The rumors in town weren't subtle anymore. They'd started small, like whispers in the corners of the local coffee shop or murmurs at the post office. "Helen's getting forgetful," they'd say. "She can't even remember where she put her own papers anymore. She really shouldn't be living alone." And I could trace it all back to Melissa. The visits, the constant little concerns, the way she'd drop by uninvited and plant seeds of doubt in every conversation. She wasn't just trying to control my son. She was working her way through the town, making sure everyone was on her side. Everyone except me. But no one could take what was mine, not if I could help it. It was late June when the next chapter of her plan unfolded. It came in the form of a leather folder tucked under her arm. A look of feigned concern etched on her face as she walked through my door. "Helen," she said, her voice so sweet it almost made me gag. "I've been working on something I think will make your life a lot easier. Daniel's really worried about you." I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. "I've got this paperwork," she continued, sitting down at the kitchen table and placing the folder in front of me. It's just a simple financial consolidation form. It'll help Daniel manage your bills and property taxes. That way, you don't have to worry about it anymore. I glanced down at the papers she'd already pulled out. The language was thick, legal jargon that would be enough to confuse anyone. But I'd been through enough paperwork in my life to know a trap when I saw one. This will make everything smoother, she added, her tone soft but insistent. Everything stays in your name, of course. It just makes things easier, especially in case anything happens to you. The words were smooth, like honey on a hot day. But the more I looked at the papers, the clearer it became. This wasn't about making my life easier. It was about consolidating power, slowly, piece by piece, until I was left with nothing but the illusion of control. I don't need help managing my finances, Melissa, I said, my voice steady despite the rising tide of anger in my chest. I've handled my affairs for decades. I don't need anyone stepping in now. She smiled, but it was the kind of smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I understand, she said. But wouldn't it be nice to have one less thing to think about? Daniel wants to make sure you're taken care of. You know how he worries. I could feel my patience slipping, but I kept it together. I'll think about it, I said, even though I had no intention of signing anything. Her smile tightened, just for a moment, before she slid the folder toward me. Take your time, Helen. But don't take too long. Time is a factor, especially if something were to happen to you. I watched her carefully, reading her every move. I wasn't just dealing with a woman who thought she could control me. I was dealing with someone who was used to getting what she wanted, no matter the cost. I didn't sign the papers, of course. But Melissa didn't stop there. The next week, she came by again, and the week after that. Each time, she had a new excuse, just checking in, making sure you're okay, dropping off some groceries. Each time, she would touch everything, my picture frames, my cupboards, the things that made this house mine. She was taking inventory, cataloging everything like it was already hers. It was during one of these visits that I noticed a new change in her behavior. She was still pushing, still insistent, but now there was something else, a sharpness, an urgency in her voice when she spoke to me. And when Daniel called that evening, I heard it in his voice too. Mom, he said, his voice tight, Melissa says you've been acting a little forgetful lately. Forgetful? I repeated, my heart sinking. What are you talking about? She said you had trouble remembering where you put some documents. And you asked her the same question twice. She's just worried. Mom, the words hit me like a punch. I knew exactly what was happening now. She wasn't just manipulating me, she was trying to make me appear incompetent to everyone, including Daniel. She wanted to control him too, to make him doubt me, to make him believe the lie she was weaving. I'm not forgetful, Daniel, I said, keeping my voice even, though it took everything I had to stay calm. I've never had trouble remembering anything. Melissa's playing you, and you're letting her. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could hear him trying to find the right words. Mom, I'm not saying you're lying. I just think maybe you're overreacting. Melissa cares about you. She just wants to help. I sat there in the silence, my blood boiling. I knew exactly what was happening. My son, the one who used to bring me flowers from the garden, who used to hold my hand when he was a kid, was now defending her. And that was the hardest part. Not that she was trying to take everything from me, but that she had succeeded in turning my own flesh and blood against me. The next week I saw Margaret again. This time, she didn't just ignore me. She avoided me entirely. She turned down a different road, speeding up as she passed my driveway. At first, I thought I was imagining things. But then, it happened again with Beth at the store. She barely spoke to me, her eyes constantly darting to the back of the shop, as if she were too busy to even acknowledge my presence. And then I overheard something that made my blood run cold. I was at the post office, sending off a package when I overheard two women talking. I didn't know them, but they were speaking loud enough for their voices to carry. I heard she's getting forgetful, one said. Her daughter-in-law mentioned it. Said she can't even remember where she put her keys. The other woman nodded. Yeah, I've heard the same. It's so sad. She really shouldn't be living alone anymore. I froze, the package still in my hands. They were talking about me. And I knew exactly who had started those rumors. Melissa. She was painting me as someone who couldn't take care of herself, someone who was losing her mind, someone who needed a caretaker. I called Daniel later that day, my voice trembling. Daniel, I think Melissa's been telling people I'm forgetful. That I'm losing my mind. That I can't take care of myself. There was a long pause. What are you talking about, Mom? I'm not the one forgetting things, Daniel. She's spreading lies about me, he sighed, and I could hear the hesitation in his voice. Mom, I don't think she meant any harm. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. She cares about you, that's all. But it wasn't a misunderstanding. And I knew it wasn't just about care. It was about control. She wanted to take everything from me, and she was willing to tear apart everything I held dear to do it. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. Melissa wasn't just manipulating me. She was manipulating everyone around me, trying to isolate me, to make me look like the one who was losing touch with reality. But I wasn't losing my grip, no, I was just getting started. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. Melissa wasn't just after my property, my assets, she was after control, pure and simple, and the more I tried to resist, the more determined she seemed to become. I started noticing things that I'd never seen before. Small changes, subtle enough to dismiss at first, but now they stood out like neon signs. The way she'd linger at the kitchen table when she came over, as if inspecting every detail. The way she'd move her things around, rearranging the cushions on the couch, running her fingers over the edges of bookshelves, as though cataloging everything. It was like she was marking territory. One afternoon, a week after I'd overheard those rumors about me in town, Melissa showed up again. No warning. No phone call. Just a sudden knock at the door. I opened it, bracing myself. Hello, Helen, she said with that smooth smile, the one that never quite reached her eyes. I brought by some groceries, thought you might need them. She handed me a bag, too heavy to be just bread and eggs. I took it, trying not to show my irritation. It was the same act every time, pretending to be helpful, pretending to care. I didn't even invite her in this time. I'm good, thanks, I said, closing the door quickly, but not before I saw the flicker of annoyance cross her face. She'd been getting more desperate lately, I could tell. Her visits were more frequent, more insistent. She always had a new suggestion, something else I needed help with, the will, the medical alert system, the financial consolidation papers. And every time I rejected her offer, she wore that same expression, a smile, but underneath, cold calculation. That night, after she'd left, I went to the porch to gather my thoughts. The air was cool, the sky thick with clouds, and the trees whispered with the breeze. I sat down in my rocking chair, staring out into the distance. That's when I heard it. A truck's engine rumbling faintly in the distance. I turned, expecting to see nothing. But then in the darkened yard, I noticed it, a figure, a man. He was standing near the edge of the driveway, just outside the glow of the porch light. I couldn't make out his face, but I saw him glance up toward the house before disappearing into the woods behind the cabin. My heart raced. Who was that? Was someone watching me? Was this another part of Melissa's plan? I stood up quickly, but the figure was already gone. There was no way to know for sure what had just happened. But it felt off. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Something was coming, and it wasn't good. The next day, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. I went into town to visit Ruth Bennett, my lawyer. Ruth had been with me for years. She handled the paperwork when I bought the cabin, set up my will, and had been a steady, reliable presence in my life. If anyone could help me figure out what was really going on, it was her. Her office was a small, no-nonsense place downtown. I'd known her since the first year I moved to the mountains, and she was one of the few people in this world I trusted completely. I parked outside the building and made my way up the stairs to her office. Ruth greeted me with a brisk handshake and a raised eyebrow. Sit down, Helen, she said. You look like you've got something to tell me. I didn't waste any time. Melissa's been getting too close to everything. To Daniel, to my life, to this house. She's been coming by all the time, dropping off things, trying to convince me to sign papers. She's been telling people in town I'm forgetful, and I am starting to wonder if she is trying to get control of my property. Ruth didn't say anything at first. She just sat there, watching me with that sharp, assessing look she always had. When she finally spoke, it wasn't with surprise, but with a kind of grim understanding. You're not imagining things, Helen, she said quietly. This is a pattern I've seen before. I've seen it with other families, people trying to manipulate, to gain control over the elderly. It starts with small things, guilt, concern, helpfulness, but eventually it escalates. I felt a weight lift off my chest. It wasn't just me being paranoid. I wasn't the only one who'd seen this play out. So what do? I asked. I don't want her to take everything from me, Ruth. She's already using Daniel against me. I don't know how much longer I can hold on. Ruth leaned forward, folding her hands on the desk. You need to protect yourself, Helen. And you need to do it legally. We'll need to set up a legal trust for your property, something she can't access. Something that proves you're still in control. I nodded slowly, the idea beginning to settle in my mind. And what about Daniel? He's been different, more distant. I feel like he's not really hearing me anymore, Ruth sighed. That's the hardest part. When someone gets in between you and your family, it's almost impossible to cut them out. But you don't have to do it alone. You've got people who have your back. It's not too late, but we have to act quickly. The next few days were a blur. I spent hours with Ruth, getting everything in order. We set up a revocable living trust, something that would ensure the cabin remained mine, no matter what Melissa tried. We also started documenting everything, every visit, every phone call, every piece of paper she'd left behind. Ruth wanted everything recorded. Nothing could slip through the cracks, but the more I prepared, the more I realized the true depth of the situation. Melissa wasn't just trying to take my property. She was trying to erase me from my own life. She was trying to make me disappear. It wasn't long before she made her next move. The phone rang late one evening, and when I picked it up, I heard her voice. Sweet, smooth, and controlled. Helen, she said, I'm coming by tomorrow. I need you to sign some final documents for the financial consolidation. It's really the best thing for you. Daniel's been talking to me about it. He just wants to make sure everything's in order. I could hear the underlying pressure in her words, the expectation that I would comply. But this time, I wasn't about to roll over. I'll be here tomorrow, I said, my voice calm but firm. But don't expect me to sign anything. There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear the shift in her tone. The smile had disappeared. Of course, she said, her voice tight. I'll see you then. The next day, I prepared myself. I knew what was coming, but this time, I wasn't just going to play along. This time, I was ready. I spent the morning pacing around the house, my mind racing as I mentally prepared for the confrontation. I'd been putting up with Melissa's manipulations for months, but today would be different. Today I would not back down. Today I would take control of my own life again. I'd been through enough legal paperwork in my life to know what needed to be done. But this wasn't just about signing documents. This was about asserting my power, reminding Melissa that she couldn't just waltz into my life and claim everything I'd worked for. I wasn't some helpless old woman for her to manipulate. As the hours ticked by, I kept checking the time. I'd already locked every door, checked the security cameras, and set up the tablet on the kitchen counter, ready to record every second of her visit. It wasn't just about protecting my property anymore. It was about protecting my dignity, my autonomy. It was about showing her that I wasn't afraid. The knock came just after 10 a.m., exactly when I expected it. I took a deep breath, gave myself a final once-over in the mirror, and walked toward the door. I didn't rush. There was no need. I opened the door slowly, and there she was. Melissa standing there in her tailored coat, her face framed by the cold autumn light, holding a leather briefcase with the same practiced smile she always wore. Good morning, Helen, she said. Her voice sweet, but sharp around the edges. I hope I'm not interrupting anything. I just brought these final papers for you to look over. I didn't invite her in. Instead, I stepped aside and motioned for her to enter. Come in, let's get this over with. She stepped inside, glancing around like she owned the place. The way her eyes flicked over the furniture, the walls, the details, it was like she was taking inventory again. Mentally calculating what she could claim next. I didn't offer her tea. Didn't offer her any pleasantries. I just nodded toward the kitchen table, where the papers sat waiting. She set the briefcase down with a soft thud and opened it. I'm glad we're finally on the same page, Helen, she said, pulling out a stack of papers. This is going to make things so much easier for you. Daniel's been so concerned lately?" Her words stung, but I kept my face neutral. "I've told you before, Melissa. I don't need your help. I'm perfectly capable of managing my own affairs." She didn't respond right away. She just looked at me for a long moment, like she was weighing whether I meant it or not. I saw the flash of irritation in her eyes, but she quickly masked it with that same polished smile. "Of course," she said smoothly. "But we both know you've been feeling overwhelmed lately. You're not getting any younger, Helen. Daniel's just trying to look out for you." There it was again. "At your age." I stepped forward, closing the gap between us. "Don't talk to me like I'm senile. Melissa, I've been living on my own just fine for years. I'm not losing my mind. I'm not overwhelmed. I'm perfectly capable of handling everything on my own. I don't need you to step in." She held up her hands in mock surrender. "I didn't mean any offense. I just want to help. Daniel wants to make sure you're taken care of. That's all." Her eyes flicked to the stack of papers in front of her. I could see the effort it took for her to keep her expression calm. "Just sign these and everything will be in place. You don't even have to worry about it anymore. It's all for your peace of mind." I glanced at the papers. I could already see the fine print, the same terms that would have tied me up in legal knots, giving her and Daniel control over everything I owned. I wasn't stupid. I'd already gone through similar contracts before. "Not happening," I said, crossing my arms. For a moment there was silence. The weight of my refusal hung between us, heavy and thick. Then Melissa's smile faltered. The facade cracked for just a second, and I saw the anger behind her eyes. But she recovered quickly, her voice dropping a little in tone. "You really don't understand, do you, Helen?" she said, her voice quieter now, colder. "I'm trying to help you. Daniel wants to help you. But if you keep fighting this, if you keep refusing, it's only going to make things harder for you. No one will be able to protect you. You'll lose everything. And you'll have no one to blame but yourself." Her words were venomous, wrapped in concern, but underneath, I heard the threat loud and clear. She wasn't just asking for permission anymore. She was telling me what would happen if I didn't comply. I stood my ground, unflinching. "You think I'm afraid of you? You think I'll just roll over and let you take everything I've worked for? Well, you're wrong." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The tension between us was thick, a tangible thing hanging in the air. Then Melissa took a deep breath, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "You'll regret this," she said softly, her voice no longer sweet but sharp, like a blade. "This isn't over. You've made a mistake. And you'll pay for it." I didn't flinch, I didn't react, I just watched her, calm and unbothered. She could say whatever she wanted, but it was clear now, she was the one who had underestimated me. "I'm not signing anything," I said firmly. "And I'm not backing down. You won't get away with this." Her jaw tightened, but she didn't push further. She gathered the papers back up, zipping her briefcase shut with a loud snap. "I'll be back," she said, her voice low. "You'll see. You'll change your mind." As she turned to leave, I felt a cold sense of finality wash over me. The gloves were off now. I wasn't just protecting my home. I was protecting myself. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. I waited for her to make her next move, but nothing came. No phone calls. No visits. Nothing. And that's when I realized she wasn't done. She was just biding her time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But I was ready. I wasn't the same woman she thought she could push around. She thought she was in control, but soon, she would see, it was me who was playing the long game. After that heated exchange with Melissa, things quieted down. Almost a quiet. It was like the calm before the storm, and the longer she stayed away, the more I began to question my own nerves. Was I just imagining things? Was this whole situation getting out of hand? But deep down, I knew I wasn't wrong. Melissa had been playing a game, and I'd been slow to recognize the rules. Now, I had no choice but to move faster to outwit her before she could make her next move. The next day, I called Ruth. I had been holding off, thinking I could handle this on my own. But the time had come to step it up. Ruth's voice was a welcome relief when she picked up. "Helen," she said briskly, "what's going on?" I explained everything, how Melissa had left after our last confrontation, but something told me this wasn't over. Ruth listened carefully, as she always did, her sharp mind processing every detail. When I finished, there was a long silence on the line. I think you're right, Ruth said finally. You need to act. And you need to do it soon. She's not going to stop. And every day she waits, the more chance she has to make her move. I felt the familiar weight of urgency settle in my chest. What do I do? First things first, Ruth said. We need to get everything in order legally. I'll help you transfer your property into a trust. That'll make it much harder for anyone to take control of it, but you need to keep playing it cool. Don't let her know what you're doing. Let her think she's still winning. Do you really think she'll try to take it? I asked, my voice tight with anxiety. I'm sure of it, Ruth replied. She's already laid the groundwork. She's manipulating Daniel, spreading lies about you, planting seeds of doubt. This isn't just about money. It's about power. And she's got her eyes on everything you've worked for. Ruth's plan was simple, but it wasn't easy. We needed to act fast. I agreed to meet her the next day to start the legal paperwork, but I knew it wasn't going to be smooth sailing. Melissa wasn't stupid. If she thought I was slipping, she'd try something more drastic. I didn't have much time, so I did the only thing I could think of. I doubled down. I took my time going through everything: documents, security footage, conversations, and began taking more detailed notes. It wasn't just about recording what she had done. It was about being ready for whatever came next. The following days felt like a blur. I spent hours at Ruth's office, finalizing the trust and working out the details of the quiet title action. It was a lot to process, and it wasn't easy. But I had to do it. For me, for my peace of mind, and for my son. As I worked with Ruth, I felt a growing sense of resolve. I wasn't just protecting a cabin anymore. I was protecting the life I'd built. My independence. My dignity. Then came the phone call. It was late one afternoon, just as the sun was beginning to set. I was sitting on the porch, sipping my tea, when the phone buzzed on the table. I didn't recognize the number, but I knew it had to be her. I answered before the first ring had finished. Helen, came the smooth, almost sugary voice on the other end. I thought I'd check in again. I haven't heard from you, and I wanted to see if you've thought more about the papers. I held the phone to my ear, my grip tight. I told you, Melissa, I'm not signing anything. She didn't respond right away, but I could feel the tension building. I could hear it in her breathing, a small hitch in her voice. I just want what's best for you, Helen, she said, her voice taking on that calculating edge again. I know you've been struggling. You don't have to do everything on your own. Daniel and I are just trying to help. I don't need your help, I said, cutting her off. I'm not struggling, and I don't appreciate you spreading rumors about me in town. There was a brief silence, followed by a small dry laugh. You think people in town are talking? Helen, you have no idea how many people I've spoken to. You're not as invisible as you think you are. I'm just trying to make sure everything goes smoothly. I'm not your enemy, she was right. I didn't know how far her influence had spread. But I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. I don't care how many people you've spoken to, I said firmly. You're not taking my house. You're not taking my life. And you're not going to tear my family apart. She was quiet for a long time, the silence hanging in the air between us. When she finally spoke again, her voice was colder, harder. You'll regret this, Helen, she said, each word deliberate. You don't know who you're messing with. I held my ground. I know exactly who you are, Melissa. And I know exactly what you're trying to do. You won't succeed. Not this time. The next few days felt like the calm before a storm. I kept my routine, continued working with Ruth on the legal paperwork, but I could feel Melissa's shadow looming over everything. It was only a matter of time before she made her move. Then, one afternoon, I got the call I had been dreading. It was Mike, the security guard, Mrs. Harland, he said, his voice tight with urgency. Your daughter-in-law's here. She's got a moving truck with her again, and a few men. They're saying they're here to move some things out of the house. My heart dropped into my stomach. I'll be there in a minute, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Let her in, Mike. But make sure you get everything on tape. Every single detail. I'll be handling this myself. I hung up the phone and stood up, my hands shaking as I reached for the tablet. I switched to the security feed and watched as Melissa's truck pulled up to the driveway. She thought she had me cornered. But she didn't know I had already prepared for this moment. The truck sat in the driveway like a harbinger of something I'd been dreading, I watched through the security feed as Melissa's men unloaded boxes and moved toward the front door. My heart raced in my chest, but there was no time for panic, not anymore. I had made my decision. And I wasn't going to let her take what was mine. I grabbed the tablet, setting it down on the kitchen counter, and made my way to the front door. I moved slowly, each step deliberate. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't running. I was standing my ground. When I opened the door, there she was, Melissa, standing with her arms crossed, wearing that same tight smile. The one that never reached her eyes. "Helen," she said, her voice smooth, almost to calm. "I thought I'd stop by again, just to tie up a few loose ends. We're just moving some things around, nothing too serious." "It's all part of the plan." I didn't answer immediately. I just stood there looking at her, watching the way she looked around the porch, her eyes scanning the space, as if she were already imagining how it would look once she'd taken control of it all. "You've been busy, I see," I said, my voice steady, but there was a sharpness to it. "But I don't think you're going to get away with it this time." Her smile faltered, just for a second. "What are you talking about?" I didn't waste any more time with pleasantries. I stepped aside, motioning for her to come in. But I made sure to keep my distance. "Come in. We need to talk." She hesitated, but only for a moment. She stepped inside, her heels clicking sharply against the wooden floor. She didn't look at me as she walked past, her focus on the space around her. I followed her into the living room, where the movers had already started stacking boxes. The same sense of entitlement I'd seen in her eyes before was there again. As if this house, my house, had already become hers. "Melissa," I said, my voice breaking through the silence. "This stops now." She turned toward me, a quick flicker of annoyance flashing across her face before she forced a smile. "I don't know what you mean, Helen. I'm just helping you get things in order." "No," I said firmly. "You're not helping me. You're trying to take everything from me. You've been manipulating Daniel, turning him against me. You've been spreading lies in town, making people think I'm losing my mind. You think I don't see it." Her expression hardened. "I'm just trying to make sure everything is taken care of. You're not getting any younger, Helen. You need to think about the future." "I've thought about the future, Melissa," I said, taking a step forward, my voice rising. "And I'm perfectly capable of managing it on my own. I don't need your so-called help. You don't get to come in here and try to control my life. This house is mine. This life is mine. And you won't take it from me." She took a deep breath, visibly trying to regain control of the situation. "You don't understand. You're only making things harder for yourself." I shook my head. "No. The only person making things harder is you. You've been pushing me for months, trying to wear me down, but I'm not going to let you win. I'm done being your pawn. And if you think you can just walk in here and take what's mine, you've got another thing coming." She took a step back, her eyes narrowing as she looked at me. "You don't know what you're up against. You really think you can fight this?" "I don't think." "I know," I said, my voice hard, unwavering. "I've already made my move. You can't control me anymore." For a moment, she didn't speak. I could see the shift in her expression. The calm facade was cracking. "You really don't understand, do you, Helen?" she said, her voice low, dangerous now. "You're not the one calling the shots anymore. I've been patient, but you've made a mistake. You won't get away with this." I didn't flinch. "The only mistake I made was underestimating you. But that ends today." I turned and walked over to the kitchen counter, where I'd placed the tablet. I tapped a few buttons, bringing up the security feed. The camera had captured everything, every visit, every conversation, every time she tried to push me into a corner. The video recordings were all there. I turned it toward her. "I've got everything documented. Every conversation. Every visit, everything. You can't erase that." Her eyes flicked to the tablet, and I saw the briefest flicker of panic in her eyes before she composed herself again. "You think that's going to stop me?" she asked, her voice shaky but defiant. "No," I said calmly, "but it's a start." I turned back toward the living room, where the movers were still packing up boxes. I walked over to the door and opened it wide. "I think it's time for you and your people to leave." For a moment, she didn't move. She stood there, glaring at me, her lips pressed together in a tight line. Then, without another word, she grabbed her briefcase and walked out the door, her men following behind her, confusion and frustration written on their faces. As soon as they were gone, I slammed the door behind them. I stood there for a long moment, listening to the sound of their truck driving away. And then, finally, I let out the breath I'd been holding. It was over for now. But I knew this wasn't the end. Melissa wouldn't give up that easily. She would try again, and she would do everything in her power to destroy me. But now I had the upper hand. Now I was the one in control. I wasn't just fighting for my house, I was fighting for my life, for my dignity, for my family, and I wasn't going to lose. The days following Melissa's departure were filled with a strange kind of silence. The air was still, the tension palpable, but for the first time in months, I felt a sense of relief. I had stood my ground, kept my home, and, for the moment, thwarted her plans. But something nagged at me, an unsettling feeling in the pit of my stomach. I couldn't shake the thought that she was just biding her time, waiting for her next move. And if there was one thing I knew about her, it was that she didn't give up easily. I spent the next few days fortifying myself. Ruth had helped me finalize everything, ensuring the trust was in place, the property was protected, and that Melissa had no legal claim to anything. I even made sure to get copies of all the recordings, keeping them locked away securely. I wasn't going to let her catch me off guard again. But the one thing I hadn't counted on was Daniel. It was Sunday when I got the call. I was just finishing breakfast, sitting at the kitchen table when my phone rang. I looked at the screen, seeing his name light up. I hadn't heard from him in over a week. It had been strange, the silence between us. I could feel the distance growing, like an invisible wall was being built between us. I picked up the phone, trying to sound casual. "Hey, Daniel, how's it going?" There was a long pause before he spoke. His voice, when it came, was softer than usual, hesitant. "Mom," he said, the word coming out more like a sigh than a greeting. "We need to talk." I felt my stomach drop. "What's wrong? Can you meet me at the cabin?" I need to explain something to you. In person, a knot twisted in my chest. Something was off. I could feel it, like an instinct that told me this wasn't going to be a simple conversation. "I'll be there in an hour," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I hung up the phone, feeling the weight of the moment settling over me. I quickly grabbed my coat and left the house, driving the familiar route to Daniel's cabin, my hands gripping the steering wheel tighter with each passing minute. What could he possibly want to talk about? And why did it feel like something was about to go terribly wrong? When I arrived, Daniel was waiting outside. He looked different, tense, like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were red, his face pale, as though he was carrying a burden too heavy to bear. He didn't greet me with his usual smile. There was no warmth in his voice when he spoke. "Mom, come inside," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I followed him inside, my heart pounding in my chest. The cabin smelled of stale coffee and something else I couldn't quite place. I took a seat at the small wooden table where we used to sit together for hours, talking about life. But now, the air between us was thick with unspoken words. "I don't know how to say this, but I've been talking to Melissa," Daniel started, his voice tight. "And I know you don't want to hear it, but she's convinced me that you're not in your right mind. That you're becoming unstable." I froze. The words hit me like a slap in the face. "What?" I managed to choke out. "You've been talking to her? Daniel, you know what she's done. You know what she's been trying to pull. And now you're listening to her lies." He didn't meet my eyes. He looked down at his hands, wringing them together like he was trying to squeeze out the truth. "She's been so convincing, Mom. She's worried about you. About your health, about the house. She says you're not capable of making decisions anymore. That I need to step in and take control." My heart sank as the words hit me. Betrayal. The cold reality that my own son had been swayed by her lies, that he was willing to turn his back on me, to believe that I was no longer capable of taking care of myself. "Daniel, she's playing you," I said, my voice breaking. "She's been lying to you, manipulating you. Don't you see that? You can't let her take everything from me. This is my home, my life." He shook his head, the conflict written all over his face. "I don't know what to believe anymore, Mom. Melissa says she's just trying to help. She says I'm the one who needs to step in. That I have to protect you from yourself, protect me from myself," I repeated, the bitterness rising in my throat. "I don't need anyone protecting me, especially not from something that isn't real." Daniel's face twisted in pain. "I know you're not getting any younger. I'm just trying to do what's best for you." Tears welled up in my eyes, but I fought them back. You think this is what's best for me? Listening to her? Letting her control everything. I don't know what else to do, he admitted, his voice shaking. I feel caught in the middle, Mom. I want to believe you, but I also can't ignore what she's telling me. I stood up, my hands trembling with frustration. Daniel, you've got to trust me. You've got to see through what she's doing. She's using you, and I won't let her take this from me. I won't let her destroy our family, but it was too late. The damage had already been done. As I left Daniel's cabin, I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. He was no longer the son I'd known. He was a stranger, someone who had been pulled into her web, someone who had sided with Melissa over his own mother. I knew he was still in there. My Daniel. But how much longer would he stay? How far would he go to protect the woman who had manipulated him so thoroughly? I got into my car, my hands shaking as I gripped the wheel. This wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about my family, my son, and if I was going to save him from her, I'd have to fight harder than I ever had before. I sat in the car for a while, the engine running, but I couldn't bring myself to drive away. My mind was racing, my heart pounding in my chest. Daniel, my son, the one I'd raised with all my love and care, was slipping away from me. I'd always feared that one day, someone would come between us, but I never imagined it would be like this. I never imagined that it would be someone like her, but I wasn't ready to give up on him yet. Not without a fight. The next morning, I made up my mind. I couldn't wait around anymore. I couldn't just sit by and let Melissa tear my family apart. I had done everything I could to protect myself, my house, my legacy. But now, it was time to protect Daniel, to show him the truth, to remind him of who he was, and who he could still be. I called Ruth, asking her to meet me. This wasn't just about paperwork anymore. It was about taking action, making sure that nothing could tear my family apart. Melissa's manipulation had gone far enough, and it was time to end it. When I arrived at Ruth's office, she was already waiting for me. Her face was serious, but there was a kindness in her eyes that gave me a small sense of relief. She'd been my friend, my ally, through all of this, and I needed her more than ever. What's going on, Helen? She asked, standing as I walked through the door. I need to take action. I need to make sure Melissa can't hurt my family anymore. I'm not just fighting for my house now. I'm fighting for Daniel, I said, my voice filled with resolve. We have to get him back. We can't let her turn him into someone he's not. Ruth didn't hesitate. I've got everything we need. The trust is in place. The paperwork is locked down. But this is going to be tricky. We need to show him that she's manipulating him. We need evidence, Helen. I've got it, I said, pulling out my tablet and handing it to Ruth. I've been documenting everything. Every visit, every phone call, everything Melissa's done. I've got the recordings, the texts, the witnesses. We've got enough to make her pay for what she's done. Ruth took the tablet and flipped through the evidence, her expression growing more and more grim as she read through it. This is solid. Helen, you've done everything you could. But the real question is, how do we get Daniel to see it? That afternoon, I went back to Daniel's cabin. I knew it wouldn't be easy. But it was time to speak the truth. No more lies. No more manipulation. When I knocked on the door, it felt different than before. This wasn't a plea for understanding anymore. This was my final stand. Daniel answered the door, his face a mask of confusion and exhaustion. I could see it in his eyes. He was torn, lost. But I wasn't going to let him stay lost. Mom, what are you doing here? He asked, his voice strained. I came to talk, I said, my voice steady. I'm not leaving until we have a real conversation. He looked behind me, probably wondering if Melissa was following. But I didn't give him the chance to close the door. I stepped in, my gaze fixed on him. I've given you everything, Daniel. I've given you my love, my support. But Melissa has been lying to you. She's been controlling you, and you don't even see it. His jaw tightened, and I could tell he was trying to fight it. Mom, please. I don't want to hear this right now. I don't care what you want to hear, I said, my voice cutting through the tension. I care about you. I care about your future. And if you don't see what she's doing, then you're going to lose everything. He took a step back, almost like he was retreating. You don't understand. I'm doing this because I care about you. She's just trying to help. No, Daniel, I said, my voice breaking. She's using you. She's using you to get everything she wants. She's been telling people I'm losing my mind, spreading lies about me, trying to convince you to take control of my life. She's not helping you. She's manipulating you, and you can't see it." Daniel's face softened, just for a moment. Like the words were beginning to break through. But then, as if a shield went up, he stepped back. Shaking his head, "You don't know what she's been telling me," he said quietly. "She says I'm the only one who can save you. I'm just trying to do what's best." "That's exactly what she wants you to think," I replied, my voice urgent now. "She's not saving me, Daniel. She's destroying me. And she's destroying you too. You're not the person she says you are. You're my son. You're better than this." For the first time, I saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes. Just a brief moment of clarity, like a cloud parting. But then he closed off again, the wall coming down, and the doubt was gone. "I can't do this, Mom," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I can't choose between you and her." "You don't have to choose between us," I said, my voice softening. "You just need to see the truth. You're not the only one who's been lied to. She's been playing both of us. And if you don't wake up, you'll lose me for good." He looked at me, and for a moment, it felt like everything hung in the balance. The world stood still. Finally, he spoke, his voice trembling. "I don't know if I can trust you anymore." The words hit me like a slap, but I didn't back down. "You don't have to trust me. You have to trust yourself." That night, as I sat in the silence of my cabin, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. But this time, I wasn't fighting for my property or my house. I was fighting for my family. And no matter what happened next, I wouldn't let Melissa win. Epilogue. The days that followed were quiet, but things began to shift, little by little. Daniel started coming around more often. At first, he was distant, unsure, but I kept showing him the truth. Kept reminding him of who he was before all of this, and slowly, he started to see it. Melissa, for all her manipulation and control, couldn't hold on to him forever. In the end, family was stronger than any lie she could spin, and it was me who was left standing, stronger than I'd ever been before. The days after the confrontation felt like a rebirth. The house, which had once felt like a battleground, now felt like home again. The air was lighter. The weight of the past few months slowly lifting. Daniel and I were talking more. The distance between us slowly closing. He was still finding his way, still torn between the woman he'd once trusted and the mother who'd always been there for him. But we were getting there. Melissa had tried to break us. She had tried to take everything I'd worked for, but in the end, she couldn't win, not when it came to family. I'd learned a lot through this whole ordeal. Not just about Melissa's manipulations, but about my own strength. I had fought for my family, for my legacy, and most importantly, for my freedom. I had held onto what was mine, no matter how hard the battle was. And as I stood on the porch of my cabin that afternoon, watching the sun dip below the mountains, I knew I'd won. Not just for me, but for Daniel. No one would ever take my life from me again. Life didn't return to normal immediately, and I wasn't expecting it to. But day by day, things began to heal. Daniel, though still learning to untangle the web Melissa had woven, started to see things more clearly. He came to visit more, and we began to rebuild what had been broken. He admitted he'd been blinded by her charm, and slowly, he realized that family, true family, was worth fighting for. Melissa disappeared from our lives, no longer able to influence the people I loved. But I never forgot the lessons learned through it all. How important it is to stand up for yourself, to fight for the people you care about, and to never let someone else control your narrative. As I sat in the rocking chair on the porch that evening, Daniel at my side, I realized that sometimes the hardest battles are the ones we fight for love and family. But they are always worth fighting. Have you ever found yourself facing a difficult situation where someone tried to take control of your life or manipulate you? What did you do to take back your power? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your story and how you overcame your challenges. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content. Your support means the world and helps me continue to share stories that matter. Stay strong, stay true, and remember, no one can take what's truly yours unless you let them.